The human colony of Vestinine had always been a symbol of progress, a beacon of hope. For all of humanity, in the far reaches of space, it had flourished in the vastness of the stars with cutting-edge technology and a peaceful society built on mutual cooperation among all its settlers. But that peace was shattered in an instant. Without warning, without reason, the Valkyrie descended from the void, their ships emerging from the shadows of distant stars, like harbingers of doom. Their vessels were sleek and deadly, their weapons powerful and merciless. Within hours, Vestinine was reduced to nothing more than a smoldering ruin. The skies above the colony filled with the smoke and fire of destruction. Entire cities were wiped from the surface in mere moments as Valkyrie warships unleashed their destructive energy weapons, each blast creating craters the size of continents. It was a swift and brutal assault unlike anything humanity had ever experienced. The settlers of Vestinine had no chance to mount a defense. The Valkyrie were too fast, too precise, their superiority in technology evident in every move. The colony's defenses were useless against the onslaught as the people of Vestinine scrambled to escape and evacuate what little they could. The Valkyrie made sure no one survived. Their weapons scorched the earth and eradicated any trace of human life. The death toll was catastrophic. Whole families, entire communities were lost in the blink of an eye. The transmission from Vestinine's central command station went silent, the last broadcast a desperate cry for help, a call that would never be answered. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Every television, every communication device blared with images of the devastation. Human beings could hardly believe what they were seeing. The images were too surreal, too horrific to be real, and yet they were. Vestinine had been one of the brightest stars in the human expansion into space, and now it was gone. Earth's leaders scrambled to understand how this could have happened, how such a powerful and advanced species could have been caught off guard by the Valkyrie attack. Their experts analyzed the footage, trying to find any clue as to why the Valkyrie had struck with such cruelty. The humans of Earth had no answers, no explanation, only the cold realization that their world had been irrevocably changed. As the days passed, the initial shock began to turn to anger, a deep burning fury that began to grow within the hearts of every human being. The loss of Vestinine had been tragic, but it had also ignited a fire within the people of Earth, a fire that would not be easily quenched. Across the globe, protests erupted in every city from New York to Beijing. The streets were filled with people demanding answers, demanding action. There were no more words for diplomacy, no more talks, no more negotiations. Only one thing was clear: the Valkyrie would pay for what they had done. Humanity was united in its resolve like never before. The world's leaders met in emergency summits, and military strategists began to form plans for retribution. But Earth knew this would be no easy task. The Valkyrie were powerful, far more advanced than humanity in every way. But humans were known for one thing above all else: their relentless will, their ability to survive against impossible odds in the face of adversity. They did not bow, they did not yield. Instead, they fought for their future, for their families, for their very existence. And as the world united under a single cause, one thing became certain: humanity would never forget what had been done to Vestinine. They would strike back, and when they did, the universe would know that humans were a force to be reckoned with. In the wake of the attack, Earth was united but stunned. The scale of the tragedy left no room for doubt or hesitation. The human race would not let this injustice stand. The world's governments gathered in secret sessions behind closed doors, where decisions were made that would alter the course of history. Earth's military leaders and top scientists were called to the table, each tasked with one goal: revenge against the Valkyrie. But this was not going to be a simple retaliation. The humans weren't looking to just strike back in vengeance. They were planning something far grander, something that would send a message not just to the Valkyrie, but to every alien species in the galaxy. In every corner of Earth, people began to feel the weight of what was about to happen. Military bases worldwide were placed on high alert. Engineers were summoned from every nation, and in the laboratories and shipyards across the planet, something unprecedented began to take shape: the construction of the largest and most powerful fleet ever conceived. 700,000 battleships, each one designed to carry the full might of humanity's resolve and ingenuity. These ships would be more than just weapons. They would be a symbol, a testament to the spirit of human perseverance and unity. The construction of the fleet was no small task, but Earth's industrial capacity had always been a marvel, and with every passing day, the ships began to take form. Colossal hulls were welded into place, powered engines were installed, and weapons systems that had once only been dreams were realized on the assembly lines. Human ingenuity, fueled by the need for justice, pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The engineers who worked on the ships came from every field of science, technology, and design, from quantum physicists to robotic specialists. They all poured their knowledge into the creation of this fleet. The goal was simple but ambitious. Humanity needed a force capable of taking on the Valkyrie head-on. The battleships would be equipped with advanced railguns, capable of piercing the toughest alien armor, and energy shields that could absorb enemy fire for long enough to retaliate with overwhelming force, cloaking devices that could conceal entire ships from detection, and AI systems that could make split-second decisions on the battlefield with unmatched precision. These ships would not only be technologically advanced, they would be able to adapt to any challenge thrown their way. But it wasn't just technology that made these ships dangerous, it was the people who would crew them. Ordinary men and women from every corner of Earth volunteered for the fleet. There were no more borders, no more divisions between countries. Everyone knew what was at stake, and what was required to fight back against an enemy that had proven they would stop at nothing to erase humanity from existence. Civilians, scientists, soldiers, and engineers, they all stood together, not as individuals, but as one united front. The human race had never known such solidarity, and it was this unity that became the foundation of the fleet's strength. As the ships neared completion, and the fleet began to take shape across Earth, a sense of anticipation gripped the planet. The thought of revenge was no longer a distant fantasy, it was becoming a reality. Every launch, every test fire, every ship entering space brought the world closer to the moment when the fleet would be deployed to Valkyrie space. The people of Earth held their breath and whispered to each other, with hope and fury combined, "We will not fail." The time for talks was over now. Only one thing remained, and it would be done in the cold void of space. Humanity would show the Valkyrie and the galaxy just who they were. As the day of the fleet's departure grew closer, the anticipation on Earth was palpable. The tension could be felt in every corner of the world. The massive construction yards were filled with final touches being made to the 700,000 battleships that had been painstakingly built over the last few months and years. Engineers worked tirelessly to ensure every detail was perfected. Each ship was inspected, tested, and retested to ensure it would stand up to the dangers of deep space and the might of the Valkyrie. The ships weren't just machines of war, they were the embodiment of Earth's determination. Every bolt, every weapon, every ounce of armor represented a people unwilling to back down. All across the planet, the countdown had begun. The time for words had passed. The fleets of warships were ready to take flight, and humanity's eyes were fixed on the stars, waiting for the moment when they would embark on their mission of retribution. With every passing hour, the anticipation grew, and the world united in the shared hope that this would be their moment to make the Valkyrie pay for what they had done to Vestinine. There were no protests, no dissent, only one singular desire for vengeance and justice burning in the hearts of every human. It was a sight to behold when the first waves of ships began to lift off from Earth's orbit. Massive engines roared to life, propelling the ships into space as thousands of onlookers gathered to watch in awe and admiration as their hopes and dreams launched into the stars. The ships were a marvel of human engineering, sleek, powerful, and ready for the coming battle. The fleet moved in perfect formation as it made its way through Earth's atmosphere and into the depths of space. The first wave was soon joined by the second and the third until the entire armada had departed Earth's orbit in an orchestrated ballet of fire and power. The world watched as their fleet departed the home they had known and embarked on a mission that would take them far beyond the safety of their world. The distance between Earth and Valkyrie space was vast, but the journey was already underway. The ships sailed on toward the unknown, where danger waited for them in the form of the Valkyrie's unmatched firepower and cunning warfare strategies. But humanity was undeterred. Their resolve was stronger than any weapon the Valkyrie could wield. With each ship that departed, the human race's message became clearer to the stars. We are no longer a species you can dismiss. With every ship leaving Earth's orbit, humanity's voice echoed louder and louder across the galaxy. Despite the overwhelming scale of the fleet, there was no hesitation from the humans who had volunteered to man these ships. Pilots navigated through asteroid fields, engineers checked the systems from command centers, ensuring that the ships remained in peak condition throughout the long journey ahead. Earth's best and brightest were now among the stars, and the weight of the responsibility pressed heavily upon them. But they did not falter. Every crew member knew the stakes, not just for themselves, but for their families, their friends, and for the billions of people who had watched Vesta-9 fall from the comfort of their homes. As the fleet drifted deeper into space, the reality of what was happening began to set in. It wasn't just a mission of vengeance, it was a mission of survival. Earth was no longer an isolated world in the galaxy. They were now stepping onto a stage far larger than they had ever imagined. But even in the face of the unknown, the humans stood together, resolute. Their journey had only just begun, and soon the Valkyrie would feel the fury of a united Earth. The journey through space was long but uneventful as Earth's colossal fleet traversed the vast distances between their home and Valkyrie space. But as they approached the outer rim of Valkyrie territory, the atmosphere shifted. Tension built among the crew members, and across Earth the first encounters with Valkyrie territory were mere moments away. The knowledge of what lay ahead loomed over every mind. The fear of the unknown mingled with the anger that had fueled their drive for retribution, yet it was tempered by the strength of their unity. No longer were they just individuals from separate nations. They were a single force, now a singular will, focused on one goal, and nothing would stop them. The fleet entered Valkyrie space, and the first encounter was not what the humans had expected. At first, everything seemed eerily silent. The stars beyond their ships were endless and empty, no Valkyrie warships in sight. But the vastness of space could be a cruel trick for an enemy that had no desire to fight in open space. Valkyrie tactics had always been strategic and precise, but this silence only served to sharpen the senses of the human commanders. They were not here to wait for an ambush, they were here to send a message, and so the fleet pressed forward with purpose and resolve. It was at the far edge of a distant asteroid belt that the Valkyrie finally revealed themselves, their ships emerging from the shadow of massive rocks like specters of destruction. Their technology was as terrifying as humans had imagined, sleek and black, with weapons that shimmered with dangerous energy. They were an imposing sight. Yet the humans did not falter. The first of the Valkyrie fleet broke formation and launched an assault, their weapons lighting up the void with deadly energy beams that streaked across the space between them. The humans responded immediately, their warships turning with grace and speed as they deployed countermeasures in seconds. Brilliant shields flared to life, absorbing the first wave of fire. The Valkyrie's first salvo hit with a thunderous force, but humanity's ships weathered the storm and began to retaliate. The battle that erupted was swift and chaotic. The Valkyrie attacked with unmatched precision, but the human fleet was not to be outdone. Their captains moved with the confidence of those who had nothing left to lose. Their tactics were different from the Valkyries. There was no reliance on overwhelming force, no carefully calculated bombardments. Instead, the human ships fought with a speed and unpredictability that caught the Valkyrie off guard. Small squadrons of human ships darted in and out of the fire from larger Valkyrie vessels, using the asteroid field as cover to launch surprise attacks. With pinpoint accuracy, the Valkyrie, masters of conventional warfare, were not ready for the lightning strikes that the humans brought to the fight. The Valkyrie flagship, a massive vessel capable of decimating entire fleets in a single strike, remained at the back of the formation, watching the chaos unfold. Its captain, a seasoned warrior, began to issue orders to regroup and counterattack, but the humans pressed on with relentless determination. The Valkyrie's formidable technology began to falter as human pilots displayed a mastery of tactics that made the Valkyrie fleet hesitate. For the first time in what seemed like centuries, humanity was making them question their superiority. In the heat of the battle, a human commander, Captain Elias Carter, saw an opening through the asteroid belt. a gap in the Valkyrie formation that could allow his strike force to get close enough to land a devastating blow on the Valkyrie flagship. Without hesitation, he issued the order. His fleet of smaller, faster ships moved like a swarm of hornets, darting through the gaps between asteroids, dodging enemy fire with acrobatic grace. The Valkyrie flagship began to take fire from all sides as the humans unleashed everything they had at its hull. It was a dance of destruction, human ships weaving in and out, making it impossible for the Valkyrie to lock onto a single target. It was a victory, but a hard-fought one, as the Valkyrie flagship limped away from the battle, badly damaged and retreating into the depths of space. But the message was clear to the Valkyrie and to the galaxy. Earth's fleet had arrived, and humanity had shown it was no longer afraid to stand against the galaxy's most powerful species. The victory over the Valkyrie flagship had been a resounding triumph, but the battle was far from over. As the human fleet continued its advance deeper into Valkyrie space, the message they'd sent was unmistakable. Humanity would not be cowed. The Valkyrie had underestimated their enemy, and now they were paying the price. But the Valkyrie were not a species to back down easily. They regrouped quickly, their massive forces spreading across the star systems in waves, deploying reinforcements that dwarfed the size of the human fleet. They had learned from their first defeat, and now they were ready to fight with everything they had. The human commanders, however, were not deterred. They had known from the beginning that this wouldn't be a simple war, that the Valkyrie would not simply fold under pressure. What had begun as a single battle now escalated into a full-scale war, and the humans were ready to meet the challenge. The next few days were filled with skirmishes, lightning-fast clashes in the void of space, human ships darting in and out of asteroid fields, striking quickly and disappearing before the Valkyrie could retaliate. But even these tactics, brilliant as they were, couldn't win the war by themselves. The humans had to press forward, and the Valkyrie knew it. It wasn't long before the Valkyrie launched their full-scale counteroffensive. A new wave of warships, larger, more heavily armed, and more sophisticated than the ones that had attacked Vesta-9, arrived on the scene. These ships were equipped with cloaking technology and hyper-advanced tracking systems, making them a nightmare for the human fleet. The Valkyrie's new strategy was simple. If the humans wanted to play dirty, they would play dirtier. They began attacking in waves, using decoys, disinformation, and complex ambush tactics to throw humanity's fleet off balance. The first of these ambushes came as a surprise. A fleet of decoy ships, indistinguishable from the real Valkyrie warships, engaged the human fleet on all sides. They fired upon the humans with heavy laser cannons, forcing the human ships to respond. But as soon as the humans began to counter, the real Valkyrie ships, hidden in the shadow of nearby planets, swooped in and unleashed a barrage of firepower. The humans were forced into an unrelenting defensive posture, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the Valkyrie might have gained the upper hand. But the human fleet did not falter. In the midst of the chaos, Captain Elias Carter, still leading his squadron, saw an opening in the Valkyrie's formation. Without hesitation, he gave the order for a daring counterattack, calling on his best pilots to split off from the main battle and strike at the Valkyrie's command ships. The human pilots moved with unparalleled precision, exploiting the weaknesses in the Valkyrie's tactics. Using their speed, the humans darted between the fire and sliced through the Valkyrie's lines, targeting the command ships that directed the attack. One by one, the Valkyrie's decoy fleet began to falter, and the human squadron took down the heart of the Valkyrie's assault. The advantage shifted again, if only for a moment. However, the Valkyrie were far from defeated. Their commander, Grand Admiral Voltar, was not the type to let a loss go unpunished. Voltar had been observing the humans' tactics, studying the way they fought. He had come to understand that the humans didn't fight like any other species in the galaxy. They weren't concerned with overwhelming force or tactical perfection. They fought with unpredictability, with grit, with a sense of purpose that was foreign to him. They were a living, breathing testament to survival. And that, Voltar realized, was the most dangerous thing about them. In response to the growing pressure, Voltaire devised a new strategy, a strategy that would take the war to its next deadly level. He would lure the humans into a trap, using their unyielding thirst for vengeance against them. The plan was set into motion as the Valkyrie began to spread false intelligence to the humans. Messages of a key strategic location, vulnerable and lightly defended, were intercepted and passed along. The humans took the bait, moving the bulk of their forces toward the false target. Voltaire's forces waited, concealed in the nearby asteroid fields, ready to strike when the time was right. As the humans moved closer, there was a growing sense of unease among the fleet. They were walking into the unknown, and they knew it. But there was no turning back. The time for doubt had passed. The time for vengeance had come, and when the trap finally sprung, it would be a battle unlike any the humans had faced before. The trap was set, and the tension was thick in the void of space. The false intelligence had worked. The human fleet, now spread thin across the star systems, was marching straight into the jaws of the Valkyrie's ambush. Every human commander knew something felt wrong, but the desire for revenge was stronger than any doubt. The fleet pressed on, determined to carry out their mission, unaware of the Valkyrie forces waiting in the dark. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Valiant, watching the starred streak by as his ships maneuvered toward what they believed was a key Valkyrie stronghold. His crew moved with precision, a well-oiled machine of calm professionalism. But Carter's gut told him something wasn't right. He glanced at his tactical officer, Lieutenant Lara Stokes, who was running analysis on their position. Her brow was furrowed, lips tight in concentration. "Something's off, Captain," she said, eyes scanning the digital readouts. "We're not detecting any significant Valkyrie presence in this sector. It's too quiet." Carter nodded, his mind racing. He knew better than to ignore his instincts. "Keep your eyes open, Lara. Stay alert. They might be hiding somewhere." As the Valiant and its fleet moved deeper into the area, the silence around them grew more oppressive. The vastness of space seemed endless, stretching far beyond what they could see. There was no sign of the Valkyrie, no ships on scanners, no movement, just the cold, empty expanse. But then, without warning, the calm was shattered. A massive wave of energy ripped through the darkness. Blinding flashes of light erupted across the sky as hundreds of Valkyrie warships decloaked from behind asteroids, debris fields, and gas clouds. The Valkyrie had been lying in wait, concealed by their advanced cloaking technology, their ambush a perfect execution of their superior tactics. The human fleet, now scattered across multiple sectors, was caught off guard, surrounded on all sides by a force far larger than expected. Carter's eyes widened in shock as he saw the numbers of Valkyrie ships. They had underestimated the enemy's strength. The Valkyrie flagship loomed in the distance, a gargantuan vessel bristling with weapons, and alongside it, a flotilla of destroyers, cruisers, and dreadnoughts formed a wall of deadly firepower. The trap had been sprung. "All hands, battle stations." Carter's voice rang out, steady despite the overwhelming odds. "We fight. We fight together." The human fleet quickly snapped into defensive positions, but the Valkyrie were already on the offensive. The first barrage of energy blasts hit the human ships with brutal force, tearing through shields and hulls. The Valiant shook under the impact, alarms blaring as systems scrambled to compensate for the damage. Carter gritted his teeth, his fists clenched on the command chair. "Return fire. Deploy countermeasures." As the human fleet retaliated, firing back with their powerful railguns and energy beams, the sheer number of Valkyrie ships overwhelmed them. It was like fighting against a storm, the skies filled with enemy fire from all directions. The human ships moved with the same agility and unpredictability they had used in the earlier battles, dodging, weaving, and striking with precision. But the Valkyrie weren't giving them an inch. Their cloaking technology made it nearly impossible to predict where the next attack would come from. Captain Carter's mind raced. They couldn't win this battle in a direct fight. They had to break free, Get to a position where they could regroup. Lieutenant Stokes, can we get to the asteroid field? We need cover to plan a counterattack. Stokes was already inputting commands into the ship's navigation system. Aye, Captain. There's a gap in their formation just ahead. We can slip through if we move fast. Carter's pulse quickened. Do it. Everyone, fall back into formation. We'll regroup in the field, then counterattack with everything we've got. The Valiant led the charge, moving with agility through the deadly barrage of fire. Other ships followed suit, darting through the Valkyrie lines like lightning strikes. As they entered the asteroid field, the humans were finally able to regroup, taking cover among the massive rocks and debris. For a brief moment, there was a lull in the battle. The humans had bought themselves time, but at what cost? The fleet was badly damaged, many of their ships crippled or heavily wounded. We can't keep this up for long, Lieutenant Stokes said, her voice tense. They've got us cornered. We need a plan, and we need it now. Captain Carter looked out at the chaos unfolding across the comms channels. The once pristine human fleet had been thrown into disarray, and the odds were more stacked against them than ever. But as he watched the survivors, the men and women who had been willing to lay everything on the line, he knew that they would never surrender. Not to the Valkyrie. Not to anyone. We wait for the right moment, Carter said, his voice steady. Then we hit them harder than they've ever been hit before. The moment of reprieve in the asteroid field was brief, but it was all the human fleet needed. Captain Carter stood at the bridge of the Valiant, eyes focused on the shattered screens showing the fleet's status. His ship had taken heavy damage, but it wasn't down. The crew had taken shelter behind the jagged rocks, cloaked by the cosmic debris and asteroid clouds. It was their chance to regroup, to regain their bearings after being battered by the Valkyrie's overwhelming onslaught. Now, it was time to take the fight back to the enemy. We've got one shot at this, Carter said, his voice cold but resolute. If we don't act now, we'll be wiped out. We've got to hit them before they regroup. Lieutenant Stokes was already analyzing the Valkyrie formation, running simulations based on their movements. The Valkyrie are trying to close the trap. They think we're crippled. They're consolidating their forces. They've underestimated us, Captain. We can use that against them. Carter's hand gripped the back of his chair. The human fleet was battered but still capable of striking. Get our squadrons ready to launch. We're going after their flagship. Once we neutralize that, the rest of their fleet will scatter. The orders went out quickly, and the fleet responded immediately. Human pilots, soldiers, and engineers worked in a rapid, synchronized manner, fueled by their shared resolve. They had been pushed to their limits, but there was no turning back now. Carter's squadron would take the lead, but every ship in the fleet would participate in this final push. As the human ships emerged from their cover in the asteroid field, the Valkyrie weren't expecting a counterattack. Their forces were scattered and disoriented, not expecting the humans to recover so quickly. But it was too late for the Valkyrie to respond effectively. The humans struck first, launching a blistering salvo of railgun fire, energy bursts, and missiles into the Valkyrie formation. The soundless, bright flashes of energy in the vacuum of space illuminated the battlefield as the human fleet surged forward, moving with fluid coordination. The Valkyrie flagship, still reeling from its earlier damage, attempted to redirect its defenses, but it was too slow. Carter's squadron led the charge, closing in on the enemy flagship. The Valkyrie's formidable weapons targeted the human ships, but the human fleet was no longer fighting with blind fury. Their movements were deliberate, coordinated, and precise. Ships darted in, unleashing torrents of fire before retreating into the cover of nearby asteroids. With every strike, the Valkyrie flagship took damage, its shields buckling under the sustained assault. "Focus all fire on their command tower," Carter ordered, his voice sharp. "We take down the brain, and the body will follow." The human ships obeyed instantly, their railguns targeting the heart of the Valkyrie flagship's structure. Each strike landed with devastating accuracy, tearing through the advanced alien armor and shielding. The flagship, once an imposing symbol of Valkyrie power, began to falter, the once impenetrable hull cracking under the relentless barrage. Meanwhile, the rest of the human fleet engaged the Valkyrie's secondary forces, their strikes coordinated to divide and confuse the enemy. Smaller human ships darted between the massive Valkyrie vessels, using their speed and agility to find gaps in the Valkyrie defenses. The Valkyrie responded with overwhelming force, but their ships were spread too thin. The Valkyrie's superior technology was no match for the creativity and resilience of the human fleet. As the flagship took more and more hits, the Valkyrie forces began to falter. The momentum of the battle shifted again, this time in favor of humanity. The Valkyrie's command ship was beginning to break apart, and their fleet began to retreat, their once unified forces scattering to regroup. But it was too late. The human fleet had them on the run. Captain Carter felt the weight of the moment but did not let it show. Finish them off. Every ship that can fire, do it now. The final barrage tore through the remnants of the Valkyrie flagship. With a massive explosion that reverberated across space, the flagship was reduced to a cloud of debris, its engines erupting in flames. The remaining Valkyrie ships tried to regroup, but without their command structure, they were lost. The human fleet, bloodied and battered but still resolute, pressed on. Victory had never tasted so sweet. The Valkyrie, who had once seemed invincible, were now fleeing before humanity's might. And while the battle wasn't over, Captain Carter knew they had delivered the message they'd come to send. The galaxy would no longer underestimate humanity. The aftermath of the battle was nothing short of chaotic, but it was also a turning point in the war. The remains of the Valkyrie flagship drifted in the cold, silent void, its wreckage a testament to the resilience and sheer will of humanity. The human fleet, battered and bruised but victorious, took a moment to regroup and assess the damage. The battlefield was littered with wrecks, both human and Valkyrie, but the decisive blow had been struck. The Valkyrie had tasted defeat in a way they had never anticipated, and humanity had earned a hard-fought victory. Captain Carter stood on the bridge of the Valiant, looking out at the vast expanse of space. The chaos was dying down, but his thoughts were heavy. This was only the beginning, and there was still much more to do. The Valkyrie were powerful, relentless, and dangerous, but the human spirit, proven in this battle, had shown that it could not be broken. It had been a costly victory, but it had also sent a clear message. Earth would no longer be pushed around. Lieutenant Stokes approached Carter, a mix of relief and fatigue in her eyes. "The flagship is gone, Captain. The Valkyrie are retreating. The rest of their fleet is in disarray. It's over for now." Carter nodded, his mind still focused. "They'll be back. They always come back. But we're ready for them," Stokes said with a firm nod. "We've shown them what we're capable of. We've made it clear. Humanity isn't something to be ignored anymore." Carter allowed himself a small smile. "That's the truth. But we need to consolidate. We can't let this victory blind us. They'll learn from this and adjust. We've only just scratched the surface of what they're capable of." The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. The humans had made a significant strike against the Valkyrie, but the alien empire was vast, and its reach stretched across countless star systems. This victory had shown the galaxy something it hadn't seen before. Humanity, a species once viewed as insignificant and fragile, could stand toe-to-toe with the greatest military power in known space. Across the galaxy, news of the victory spread like wildfire. The Valkyrie had been a name spoken in fear and awe throughout countless worlds, but now, the story was different. Humanity had struck back, and the galaxy could feel the tremors of that shift. Earth's reputation had changed in a single decisive moment. The humans were no longer just survivors. They were warriors, capable of facing down impossible odds and emerging victorious. As the human fleet began its long journey home, repairs were underway on the damaged ships, and crews were tending to the wounded. The cost of the battle had been high, and many ships would require months of work to return to full capacity. But there was no time to rest. The war was far from over, and the Valkyrie would regroup. New battles would come, but humanity had learned something important. What they lacked in size or advanced technology, they made up for in spirit, ingenuity, and determination. Captain Carter stood with his hands behind his back, looking out at the stars. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The Valkyrie would never look at humanity the same way again. And as the Valiant and the rest of the fleet began their journey back to Earth, Carter knew that this was just the beginning. The war had only just begun, but humanity had proven that it was a force to be reckoned with. No longer would Earth be seen as weak, vulnerable, or insignificant. No longer would anyone dare to underestimate them. "Set a course for Earth," Carter said, his voice calm but filled with an undeniable sense of purpose. "We're coming home." The crew of the Valiant responded in unison, their voices filled with the same purpose that had carried them through the battle. The human race had stood firm, had fought, and had proven to the stars that humanity was no longer something to be underestimated. They were warriors, and they would make their mark on the galaxy, one battle at a time.